Today, we're diving into a medical mystery that reveals something really profound. We're going to see how the trauma of war, it isn't just a memory. It's a biological event that can actually echo for generations, rewriting our very biology.
So get this, a doctor actually said this about a patient whose cancer treatment had just inexplicably stopped working. It's a statement that just doesn't seem to make any medical sense, right? If a cancer patient's main trauma isn't the cancer,
then what on earth was it? I mean, what could possibly be more traumatic than a life-threatening disease? This one question, it just blows the doors open on this incredible connection between our minds, our bodies, and the world around us.
To really get our heads around this, we need to meet the patient at the very heart of this mystery. Her name is Irina. Okay, so Irina is a 40-year-old mother of 3 from Ukraine. She was diagnosed with cancer, but her treatments were actually working. But then, in 2022, the war forced her to flee to the United States, and that's when everything just completely changed. Suddenly, her treatments failed. Her doctors, they just saw that she was deeply sad, withdrawn, disengaged.
For physicians eventually came to this just startling conclusion. The trauma that was completely overwhelming her system, it wasn't the cancer. It was the war she had escaped, a conflict that was still raging thousands and thousands of miles away. You see, this was an invisible wound. Irina's family, including her son who was serving as a soldier, they were all still in Ukraine. She was just consumed by this constant, gnawing fear and this crushing sense of survivor's guilt. She honestly felt like she didn't deserve to heal while they were all still in danger.
So here's the billion-dollar question, right? It's one thing to feel stressed out. We all get that. But it's another thing entirely for that stress to physically overpower something like chemotherapy. To understand how that's even possible, we need to look at the biology of long-term adversity.
Yep, to find the answer, we have to look at the biology. We've got to understand what happens inside our bodies when that emergency response system is switched on and then is never allowed to shut off.
So our bodies have these 2 amazing systems to keep everything in balance. First, you've got homeostasis. That's kind of like your house's thermostat. It reacts to changes to keep things stable. But then there's allostasis, and this is the really cool one. It's predictive. It anticipates challenges. You know that feeling when your heart starts racing before you have to sprint for a bus? That's allostasis, getting you ready for action. It's brilliant.
but what happens when that state of emergency, that sprint for the bus, never ever ends? Well, you get something called allostatic overload. The body's adaptive systems, they just go into total overdrive, causing massive long-term wear and tear. For Irina, the threat wasn't a bus, it was a war, and for her, it was constant.
This overload creates this low-grade chronic inflammation that just throws our whole immune system out of whack. Imagine your immune system has 2 different divisions. The part designed to fight viruses and tumors, let's call it Circuit 1, it gets weaker. At the exact same time, the part that fights things like parasites and allergens, Circuit 2, gets stronger, overactivated. And here's the crucial point. The body's own defense system, the one you desperately need to fight cancer, gets suppressed.
So this is the connection. This is the aha moment. Irina's constant fear and guilt, her psychological trauma, was literally changing her biology. It created this internal, pro-inflammatory environment where cancer could just thrive, and her treatment simply couldn't work. Her mind was, in effect, siding with the disease.
Irina's story is just so powerful, but it's not unique, not by a long shot. So let's zoom out now and see how this biological wound of war doesn't just affect one person. It actually echoes across entire societies and even across time. The scale of this is just staggering. In 2024, it was estimated that 1 in every 8 people on this planet had been directly exposed to armed conflict. Just let that sink in. 1 in 8.
And by the end of 2022, the number of people displaced by conflict had reached 107 million. That's 107 million individual stories of trauma, and every single one of them is creating the potential for that allostatic overload we were just talking about.
And as devastating as all of that is, the science is showing us something even more sobering. The trauma of war isn't contained to a single lifetime. It can actually be passed down.
This happens through a process called epigenetics. Now, don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Think of it this way. Your DNA is the hardware, right? But epigenetics is the software. It's what tells your genes which programs to run.
And extreme stress, like the kind from war, can actually rewrite that software. It changes how your genes are expressed without ever mutating the DNA itself.
And this creates this absolutely devastating cascade. You have the first generation, the ones who experience the trauma, and it alters their biology. Then their children, generation 1, they can inherit this altered stress response. By the time you get to the grandchildren, generation 2, studies show they face a 15 times higher risk of poverty and homelessness. The trauma is now a social and economic reality.
And this isn't just some fringe theory. Researchers have confirmed it. They've found that this exposure to war creates an epigenetic alteration that it can be transgenerational. In other words, the biological signature of a historical event becomes the lived reality for generations to come.
So, after seeing the individual impact, the biological impact, and the generational one, we arrive right back where we started, at the same massive question Arena's doctors had to ask.
We can now see the entire chain, this unseen chain of causality. It starts with a geopolitical event like war. That leads to chronic psychological stress in an individual. That stress then triggers a biological consequence, allostatic overload, which creates a societal ripple effect that can last for generations.
So if there's one crucial takeaway from all of this, it's this. War isn't just something we read about in history books or see on the news. It is a biological event that rewrites our immune systems, alters our genetic expression, and can chart the course for the lives of people who haven't even been born yet. And so we end right where we started, with the question that Arena's physicians posed. When the wound is this wide, this deep, and this long-lasting, where do we even begin to heal it?